Gaza war.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk about it. Everyone talks about all the other wars. No one wants to talk about what's happening there. And obviously, I've done a lot. I've been cancelled about it. You know, there was even a plan to the Israeli side. There's someone who's more pro-Israeli. Apparently, there was a recording of them planning to kill me in Canada.
Wow.
And the Palestinians have been called a Zionist and a Hamas sympathizer or terrorist sympathizer. That's what happens when you try to be in the middle. On the other side, I was on a fatwa list. You know, the list. I think they want to kill you on one stage until they removed me. So it's a very, very tough issue where it started impacting my business, my team. I lost team members because they were too emotionally attached to the topic. Now, again, you went all fucking in that topic.
Yeah, yeah, I went all in, and I mean the conversation around the Israel-Gaza war is kind of interesting to me because people have all these they try and have detailed conversations and breakdowns of the history, and they talk about the laws and the times that the countries were formed, and we can do all of those things, and I understand why that's important, but the fact that you can see children being blown to pieces and not think that that should stop is remarkable to me.
I don't take many positions. One is the war should stop. That's the most obvious position.
The fact that people will sit and say, oh yeah, but, there is no but. Those are children getting blown to pieces by the most advanced weaponry on the planet. There is no but. And that's where I first fell out with people like Ben Shapiro, because he's saying, oh, Israel, Israel, Israel. I'm like, bro, stop calling for death, at least. Can we not agree that people shouldn't die? Can't we stop that? Oh, but Hamas did. That's not even what, I mean, that's actually such a pathetic argument. Oh, but Hamas did October 7th, and then you have to go back down through the whole history and everything, what happened, because it didn't start on October 7th. It started 50 years before that. And we're talking about babies getting blown up today. But these people are too emotionally involved to understand that. And yeah, I had big arguments with Jordan Peterson and Piers Morgan and Ben Shapiro after October 7th because they're on the wrong side of history.
Piers Morgan says, I like his stance, at least now. He tries to be balanced as much as possible.
Well, he tries after I set his ass straight, because when I was arguing with him, he wasn't balanced.
Yeah,
he was sitting there pretending that what Israel was doing was completely acceptable. And I had to argue with him over it multiple times before he finally accepted that what they're doing is unacceptable. People like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro have been calling for them to do what they've been doing all this time, and they still think it's acceptable. And they're going to have to answer to the Creator in the end, because to sit behind your desk and call for the destruction of children is something that is so heinous. Your heart must be so black. I don't understand how these people even function. And especially what's annoying about it to me is that these people have never even seen violence themselves. You know, when you've seen violence, you kind of understand it at a more intrinsic level. That's why the people who call for war are the people who don't go to war. Ben Shapiro sits behind his little desk on his booster seat telling everyone who to fight all the time. He's never fought anyone in his life ever. He's a pussy. He won't even have a boxing match. He's a bitch, and he's talking about who should get shot in the head. Fuck him. When you've seen violence, that's what I even tweeted. When he said, after October 7th, I think it was October 8th, when he said we need to go and kill them all, I said, as someone who's done his own fighting, let me promise you, no, I remember what he said now. When there was negotiations with Hamas on October 8th or 9th, he said, no negotiations, kill everyone in Gaza. Like a genocidal maniac, like most Zionists are.
Kill everyone in Gaza?
Something like that. No negotiations, kill everybody, teach them a lesson, some crap. And I said, as someone who's done his own fighting, let me promise you, peace is always worth a discussion. That's what I replied. As someone who's done his own fighting, that's the key difference between me and you, Ben. I've done my own fighting. You've never done any. And that offended him deep in his heart because he's such a tough guy on Twitter. Ben Shapiro is the toughest man in the world on Twitter. But he does that to compensate for the fact that in the real world he's a pussy, and everyone knows he's a pussy. And this is the problem about insecure people or people with small man syndrome, especially on Twitter or with foreign policy, because they don't have to do the fighting themselves and they want to prove that they're a tough guy. They're actually tyrannical and psychopathic. People who have done their own fighting aren't that way. But yeah, the Gaza struggle and the struggle of the Palestinians is disgusting. And it's kind of amazing to me the cognitive dissonance between people on the right who believe their land should be for them and they're not happy to be ethnically replaced by minorities and they don't like illegal immigrants. But then they're pro-Israel. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense to me. You said that your land should be defended. Well, they're defending their land, aren't they? Oh, no, they're terrorists. Well, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But this is another subject, you're right, which is very difficult to go down. I went all in. I made it very clear I support the Palestinian struggle. I do support that.
I don't know what your stance, I got a general idea of your stance. I don't think we've talked about it on my space when you came on, never on those spaces. Did you condemn? I know that's like a typical question. It's like an aha moment question, but genuinely speaking,
you're not going to Piers Morgan me, are you?
Yeah, no. So I don't mean to Piers Morgan you, because I know people use it in that regard. I'm sure Piers Morgan asked you that question.
Do I condemn October 7th? Do I condemn violence? It's such a loaded, stupid question. I'm going to tell you why. To say that I condemn October 7th in and of itself as an individualized event throughout a 70-year history of endless events. Every single day was an event. One child dying, getting shot in the head by the Israeli army because the snipers were having fun is an event. We may not know what day it was. We may not know the name of that kid, but it's been happening for 70 years. Every single day was an event. We talk about the one day that the news decided to highlight because it fits their agenda, because the wealthy Jews and bankers own everything. So it fits their agenda. So we talk about this one specific day. To choose one day and pluck it out of this entire saga and condemn that one particular part without context is asinine. It doesn't even mean anything. And then to condemn the idea of violent resistance to violent oppression is also asinine. What do we expect people who have been suppressed for 70 years, losing their land and being violently attacked to do? Kumbaya? Is that what we expect? Endless kumbaya as they get marched off the cliff like lemmings? It's natural inside of the human spirit to resist oppression. That's what I do. That's the reason I have a brand at all. And my oppression is resisting the lies of the Matrix, let alone resisting an occupying army that killed my family members. And we're going to sit and say that these people on October 7th are so heinous, they must be condemned because they violently acted against an endless violent oppression. I don't think that even makes any sense. That's illogical. The fact that they can't win the fight and they still feel forced to act shows how oppressive and disgusting the regime is in the first place. If a small little girl attacks a full-grown big man, something big must be going on because she can't win that fight. So why is she even doing it? She must be desperate because she stands no chance. Are we going to condemn her? Or are we going to ask why she felt the need to attack that man in the first place? Maybe he's been sexually abusing her for years. But no, let's forget the sexual abuse. Let's forget the fact he beats her mother. Let's forget all that, and let's condemn this 6-year-old because she scratched the big man. Let's condemn. And then the big man's repercussion, which is completely disproportionate and disgusting, let's pretend that that's acceptable because of this one day that we're all condemning. This is a fucking psyop. That is a psyop. Talk about this one little part and use it as an excuse for everything else. It is a psyop. And I refuse to play the game. That's why I refuse to condemn it. Because I refuse to play the stupid game. It's a stupid game. So I refuse to play it.
That's a good answer.
Thanks.
No, because my answer would have been a lot simpler, a lot less interesting. It's like, I condemn what happened on October 7th, but I also condemn everything Israel did to kind of lead to that day.
Well, listen, let me talk from personal experience. Let's move away from the subject and talk from personal experience. Murder is bad, but there are so many scenarios in which I would murder. No doubt about it. So to sit and say that they did a bad thing without context is illogical. Because murder is bad, but I would kill. No doubt about it in my mind. And there's a whole bunch of scenarios in which I'd kill. So for me to sit and say, I condemn killing without any context doesn't make sense. That's what they've tried to do. The general consensus of the PSYOP was to try and get everybody to condemn what Hamas did on October 7th, to try and explain away the genocide which took place afterwards. And it worked for a while. But the genocide's gone on for over a year now.
Yeah, even the Saudi king called it a genocide a few days ago.
Yeah, it's gone on for over a year. So it didn't work with me at the beginning. But you know, my brand and a lot of my online presence is based on the fact that I'm right before everyone else. It's not that I'm the only one who's right. I'm just right first. I was right on COVID first, and I was right on October 8th. On October 8th, I said this is a genocide. On the 8th, when nobody else said it.
Really?
And then, yeah, October 8th,
I didn't know you were that early onto the topic.
October 8th, I was arguing with Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. You can see it all on Twitter.
Oh, shit.
I argued with Piers on the 11th of October, I believe. I'm calling it a genocide.
So that's before the whole narrative shifted.
Oh, yeah. I knew what was going to happen because I understand the world. I understand psyops very well. What did we say at the beginning of this interview? How they use the media and they line things up so that they can use the judicial system to then have the public support their public attack or their lynching of a person. They use the media to set up what they're going to do. The way they came after October 7th, the way the media started talking about how October 7th is the worst thing that's ever happened, I knew that the repercussions for that day were going to be disproportionate. I knew it. By the way they were setting it up in the media, or they wouldn't have mentioned it at all. There's been violence in Gaza and Israel for the last 70 years. They barely talk about it. They don't care. The fact they jumped all over October 7th and made a big deal of it was only to lay the ground for their genocide. That was clear. That's obvious.
But then how do you deal with the cognitive dissonance caused by Trump's position? Obviously, you support Trump, but his position on the Palestinian cause, many pro-Palestinians...
Well, he said he'd stop the war.
Well, exactly. He
said he'd stop the war, which is important. I mean, the first thing to do before you start discussing reallocation of land is to stop the war. And he has promised to stop the war. He has not said he's
So you mean even if he's, let's say, very pro-Israeli, as long as he stops the war, that's what matters?
Well, I think that he has more chance of stopping the war than Kamala. The first thing to do would be stop the bleeding. First thing. I'm not saying he's the perfect person. I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not saying he's going to provide.
And you're allowed to disagree with many of his positions,
and I'm allowed to disagree
even if you like him.
100%. I can still think he's the best person for America.
You'd be an idiot to like everything he does. That's just blind trust.
But a lot of people are idiots. I think a lot of the reason the American right support Israel is because they just like everything the American right do. The problem is with conservatives and the right wing is that they're just as stupid as the left. They're just as ideologically aligned as the left. The fact that I will sit here and agree that Gaza should be free and disagree with Israel, but then also agree with Russia and Ukraine is really remarkable, because if you find the Ukraine flags, the Ukraine and Palestinian flags go together. They support the underdog. That's just how it is in their mind, because the liberals support the underdog in all things. They support the weakness because they're weak. So they support the Palestinian cause, which they're right on, and they support Ukraine, which they're wrong on. But they're just ideologically aligned to the underdog. And then you have the right-wing guys, the other people on the other side, who it's Israel, Israel, Israel. What's Israel ever done for you? Oh yeah, but the other guys are terrorists. Says who? The news? The news that you've been saying are fake, because you're the right wing. You've been saying fake news since 2016 when Trump said it, but when they say Israel's good, you believe that part. So you believe the parts of the news you want to believe, you don't think for yourself. So the right wing are just as bad as the left wing. So you have a whole group of people which are ideologically aligned completely 100% on both sides and don't want to think for themselves. It's very rare you have somebody who actually looks at each individual issue and is prepared to contradict their own team's position for personal, for personal sovereignty, I guess is the key word. But also that comes with problems. There's people inside the Republican Congress, there's people on the right wing who may not like me primarily because of that one stance. Yeah. That's how it goes.